The docking clamps shuddered beneath my boots as the shuttle settled against the Laceran Palace platform, and for a brief moment I wondered if I had somehow boarded the wrong ship. Everything around me gleamed with crystalline towers shaped like spirals of frozen starlight, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and lavender metal. I had been sent here because I was, apparently, the embassy's most practical technician, which I suspected was a diplomatic way of saying I was the only one who didn't blow something up during routine maintenance. Still, nothing in the briefing prepared me for the moment I stepped onto the platform and saw Queen Saralith herself, towering, armored, solemn, and accompanied by silent guards whose long ears twitched like satellite antennas, scanning for danger. She didn't look at me at first. She was examining her chest plate, running a finger along a crack that ran from shoulder to sternum like the aftermath of a meteor strike. The advisors were already panicking, whispering that the only forge masters capable of repairing royal armor were 3 galaxies away on a pilgrimage. I should have kept my head down. I should have pretended not to notice. Unfortunately, curiosity and bad impulse control are my lifelong traveling companions. And before I understood what my legs were doing, I had stepped forward and said, "If it helps, I have some tools." Every guard drew a weapon, all of them, at once. Even one who looked like he was half asleep somehow managed to pull out a staff taller than me. Their ears shot upward like startled arrows. I raised my hands immediately as if surrendering would magically erase the sentence I had just spoken. Queen Saralith finally turned, and her gaze swept over me with an authority so intense I was certain she could see all my questionable life choices. Her long ears tilted slightly forward, a movement I later learned meant she was intrigued, or at least amused that a human was volunteering to die early. "Human," she said, her voice deep, clear, and metallic around the edges, as if her words were forged rather than spoken. "You believe you can repair something sacred?" "I mean, sacred is a strong word. Back home, my mother calls her pressure cooker sacred, and I'm still allowed to fix that," I said, instantly regretting every sound that came out of my mouth. There was a long silence. One guard coughed. Another blinked in disbelief. The Queen stared at me, as if deciding whether to laugh or vaporize me, and I genuinely wasn't sure which outcome would arrive first. Then the chest plate emitted a small, desperate spark, a very unhealthy one. The Queen glanced down, and something unspoken shifted in the air. She gave a small nod, barely noticeable, but enough to send her advisors into chaos, and stepped closer, her armor humming like a dormant star engine, waking from sleep. "Proceed," she commanded. Now, in my defense, human tools are not meant for ancient alien armor, bound by millennia-old psionic rituals. But the crack was widening, and I knew panic when I saw it, even behind the royal mask she wore. So I kneeled, unrolled my kit, and muttered something about cosmic warranties. The surface of the armor flickered between colors I didn't have names for, and when I touched it, it felt both cold and alive, like touching the skin of a creature made of metal and memory. I focused, letting instinct take over, and gently adjusted the fractured edges. Tiny filaments of energy sparked under my thumbs, wrapping around my wrist like curious fireflies. The Queen inhaled sharply, and for a moment I wondered if I had just connected myself to an ancient curse. But the armor accepted my touch. The cracks sealed, humming with renewed stability, and the entire chamber went silent. Not peaceful silent, but the kind of silent where 1,000 people collectively stopped breathing. Then someone in the crowd shouted a word I did not understand. Another echoed it, then a third. The sound grew, rolling through the hall like a wave gathering strength. "Damat! Damat! Groom! Groom!" I looked around in panic. No, wait! I just fixed a crack. A crack? This isn't a marriage proposal where I come from, unless we're talking about repairing a neighbor's dishwasher, and even then it's debatable. The chanting only grew louder. Guards pounded their staffs against the floor in triumph. Elders wept tears of joy. Someone threw flower petals made of shimmering crystal shards. I tried to dodge them, mostly because one hit me in the eye. Queen Saralith's expression remained unreadable, but her ears angled fully forward now, focused, alert, intensely attentive. She studied me as if she had just uncovered a secret. "You touch the heart line of my armor," she said calmly. "Do you understand what that means?" "No," I answered honestly, "and I feel like ignorance might be my only remaining survival strategy." The Queen stepped closer, towering above me, and the chant of "Groom" thundered around us like an orbiting storm. "It means," she said, her voice impossibly steady, "that my people now believe you have vowed yourself to me, And just like that, I realized I had accidentally proposed to the most intimidating woman in the galaxy. The moment the Queen finished speaking, the hall erupted into louder cheers, and I realized the situation had somehow evolved from mild misunderstanding to galactic-scale engagement announcement. I attempted a graceful retreat, which in practice looked like one backward step, followed by tripping over a ceremonial vase that had absolutely not been there a moment ago. The vase emitted a polite chime as it shattered, because apparently even pottery on this planet behaved with more dignity than I did. A nearby guard helped me up while chanting, "Groom," as if encouraging a contestant in an interstellar cooking show. I considered correcting him, but he was twice my height and had arms like reinforced starship beams, so I just nodded weakly. Queen Saralith lifted a hand, and the hall fell silent with military precision. The crowd obeyed instantly, their long ears tilting toward her, like living antennae, waiting for the next transmission. She turned to her advisors, who bowed so deeply I thought one might snap his spine. Without looking at me, she commanded, "Bring the human to the Hall of Accord. The vows must be examined." "The vows?" I squeaked, but no one acknowledged my very reasonable panic. Two guards escorted me forward. Though escorted is a generous word, it felt more like being gently kidnapped. As we walked, I whispered to the guard on my left, "Is this normal?" He replied with absolute sincerity, "Only 3 men in our history have touched the Queen's armor. 2 became legends. 1 became a constellation." I swallowed hard. "Is that a metaphor?" "Only partly." "Fantastic. Truly reassuring." The Hall of Accord turned out to be a massive chamber carved from luminescent stone that pulsed faintly with each footstep. The air shimmered with drifting particles that looked like glowing pollen, though a guard informed me they were ancestral data motes. Apparently, thousands of years of marriage traditions were floating around me like glittery ghosts. I tried not to inhale them too deeply, in case absorbing alien wedding lore through my lungs became legally binding. Queen Saralith entered last, her presence shifting the room's energy. Her armor hummed again, smoother now after my accidental repairs, and several elders gasped as though witnessing a miracle. One whispered, "It responds to him," which prompted the entire group to turn and stare at me as if I were a rare exotic pet. The Queen gestured for me to step forward. "Human, you will speak your intention before the hall?" "My intention," I said slowly, "is to firmly, clearly, and enthusiastically not marry anyone without at least getting a full orientation packet first." A few advisors exchanged horrified glances. One fainted dramatically. Another murmured, "He invokes comedy in sacred space. It must be true love." I pinched the bridge of my nose. This was going splendidly. Saralith studied me with unnerving calm. "Your humor is unusual, human Aran, but intention must be clarified. Did you or did you not willingly repair my armor's heartline?" "I did, yes," I admitted, "but mostly because it looked like it was about to explode, and I'm allergic to explosions." Murmurs rippled through the elders. "Selfless, protective, a brave offering." One even cried, "He shields her with his own chaos," which was not a sentence I ever expected to be praised for. The Queen stepped closer, her long ears angling forward again. "You touched something sacred to our lineage. You risked yourself without being asked. Our traditions interpret this as a vow." "Well, my species interprets this as a seriously unfortunate Tuesday," I said softly. Her lips twitched. Not a smile, more like the ghost of one. "Nevertheless, we must find clarity." She extended a hand. "Take my wrist." I hesitated. "Last time I touched something of yours, I started a revolution." "This will not start a revolution," she assured me. "Probably." Reassuring. I reached out and gently wrapped my fingers around her wrist. Instantly, the chamber responded. Light swirled upward, forming holographic glyphs that danced around us. The ancestral motes pulsed in synchronized patterns, and somewhere deep within the hall, a resonant chime echoed as if judging my life choices. The advisors gasped. "A resonance match! Impossible, he's human. No human has ever synced with royal psionics." I blinked. "Wait, synced? What does synced mean in this context? Because back home, syncing usually involves Bluetooth and disappointment." The Queen inhaled slowly, her expression unreadable, though her ears softened slightly. "The hall acknowledges you. It believes your vow was sincere." "I didn't make a vow." "Intentions speak louder than words." "That's very poetic, but also extremely inconvenient." The swirling light intensified before collapsing into a single luminous band around our joined wrists. The elders erupted into cheers, and one shouted, The union is acknowledged, I yelped, trying to shake the glowing band off, but it stubbornly refused to leave. The queen, meanwhile, examined it with quiet fascination, as though she were observing some strange cosmic puzzle she hadn't yet decided to solve. The guards looked ready to throw a planetary parade. Advisors made frantic notes. The hall buzzed like a hive celebrating a new queen. Queen Sarilith finally turned to me, her voice steady despite the chaos. Human Aaron, whether you intended it or not, you have triggered ancient protocols. My people now recognize you as a potential consort. I stared at her horrified. And what does that mean exactly? It means, she said, that the cultural misunderstanding you fear has only just begun. I followed Queen Sarilith through the corridors of the palace, trying not to look like someone being escorted to his own execution. The glowing band around my wrist pulsed softly, syncing with the faint hum of her armor, like two devices accidentally paired during a software update. Every few seconds I tried to shake it off, but the light only tightened, as if reminding me that resistance was futile. At one point I whispered to it, "If you let me go, I'll buy you a charging port," but it offered no mercy. Sarilith walked ahead with controlled precision, her long ears angled in a way that suggested she was listening both to the palace sensors and to my escalating anxiety. We entered a chamber lined with floating crystal panels projecting ancient texts that drifted like slow-moving star maps. Advisors waited inside, each wearing expressions somewhere between awe and severe indigestion. The moment they saw the glowing band around our wrists, they bowed so deeply their ears nearly touched the floor. Sarilith raised a hand. "We will now assess the humans' intentions in full." I stepped forward and cleared my throat. "Can we assess them in halves instead? Maybe quarters? I feel like full assessment is how deep space horror movies start." One advisor gasped. "Humor in the chamber of truth. This bond grows stronger by the moment." I stared at him. "Please don't say terrifying things like that." Sarilith gestured toward a hovering sphere of blue fire. "This is a memory orb. It reveals emotional truth by projecting one's thoughts into shared space." "Oh, good," I said. "A psychic projector. Exactly what I needed today." "Place your hand upon it," she said, stepping close enough that the warmth of her armor brushed my shoulder. "I will observe. Nothing more." I hesitated. "And if something goes wrong?" "Then we will learn from the ashes," an advisor offered cheerfully. "Great, super comforting." I touched the orb. Instantly, the room dissolved into swirling images, memories from my life flashing around me like someone had turned my brain into a holographic slideshow. There was my childhood bedroom, my first failed job interview, the time I spilled coffee on a celebrity at the spaceport. The advisors watched each memory with scholarly fascination, taking notes as if my humiliation were profound cultural data. One murmured, "He reveals his weaknesses with honesty, a promising trait." "I reveal them because I can't control the projector," I protested. Then the memories shifted to the moment I touched Sarilith's cracked armor. The orb magnified my emotions, fear, instinct, determination, and the queen's ears twitched as she studied it. She didn't interrupt. She didn't mock me. She simply watched, and I realized she was trying to understand me, truly understand me, in a way no one had before. The orb slowly faded. The room solidified again. Sarilith turned to her advisors. He acted without selfish intent. His motives were protection and curiosity. The elders nodded reverently. "A fitting foundation for union." "Stop using that word," I groaned. The queen ignored my suffering. "Now it is your turn," she said, placing her hand on the orb. The floating fire brightened, swirling around her fingers, and scenes burst outward. I saw flashes of her childhood, training arenas, ceremonial armor fittings, and long, solitary halls of crystal. Her mother, stern and regal, drilling her in the expectations of a queen, her victories, her burdens, and beneath it all, a persistent loneliness, deep and quiet like a dormant star. I hadn't expected any of that, certainly not the loneliness. The advisors whispered in excitement, but I barely heard them. Sarilith stood composed, though I sensed a tension she rarely allowed others to glimpse. When the orb dimmed, she looked at me, not with the cold, formal gaze of earlier, but with something warmer, sharper, almost vulnerable. "Now you understand why the armor is sacred," she said softly. "It has been my companion in every battle. Touching it is touching my history." I swallowed. I thought I was just fixing a crack. "You touched more than that," she replied. A dangerous sentence, but her voice carried no threat. One advisor stepped forward. "We must proceed to the next test, the path of harmony." Sarilith nodded. "Very well." I blinked. "The what now?" Without warning, the floor beneath us lit up. forming a path of floating hexagonal platforms. They shimmered like stepping stones made of starlight, rearranging themselves with mechanical precision. You will walk beside the queen, an elder explained. If your steps remain aligned, your bond is harmonious. My steps? I asked. Have you seen me walk? I trip over shadows. But Sarilith extended her hand. Come. Her gauntleted fingers were steady, patient. I took her hand reluctantly, and together we stepped onto the first platform. It wobbled. I wobbled. Sarilith tightened her grip slightly, stabilizing me. The second platform shifted in midair, but she anticipated it effortlessly. I tried to imitate her movements and failed instantly. My foot slipped. The platform jerked. I flailed with all the elegance of a malfunctioning robot. Somehow Sarilith caught me by the arm before I fell off entirely. The advisors gasped. She supports him. She guides him. He is unworthy of the path, but she chooses to steady him. Can everyone stop narrating? I begged. Sarilith's mouth curved faintly. Focus, she said. She guided me step by step until we reached the end of the path. The final platform glowed brightly, acknowledging success despite my clear incompetence. The elders erupted in cheers. The harmony is proven, one shouted. I turned to Sarilith. Harmony? Really? Did they not see me nearly fall to my death 6 times? They saw me choose to catch you, she said quietly. That is what matters to them. Her ears tilted forward again, a gesture I now recognized as meaning she was studying me deeply. Too deeply. And for the first time, I wondered if the misunderstanding I kept trying to escape was slowly becoming something neither of us fully understood anymore. The advisors wasted no time dragging me from one ceremonial ordeal to the next, as if they feared the universe might collapse if they didn't properly evaluate the human who had accidentally proposed by fixing a crack. I followed Queen Sarilith through yet another ornate doorway that opened into a chamber filled with hovering statues, each shaped like past rulers whose long ears jutted upward in permanent disapproval. Their eyes glowed faintly, tracking our movements. I whispered, Do they always stare like that? Yes, Sarilith replied calmly. They judge all who enter. Wonderful. Nothing boosts confidence like being judged by floating stone ancestors. In the center of the room, a pedestal rose from the floor, holding a crystalline orb carved with swirling patterns. I grimaced. Please tell me this one doesn't explode. It evaluates sincerity, announced an elder, ignoring my plea. Both parties must answer its questions truthfully. If either lies, the orb emits corrective energy. Corrective energy, I repeated. As in a gentle beep or as in a lethal blast? That depends on the lie, he said cheerfully. I leaned toward Sarilith. Are you sure your culture doesn't have a simpler approach? Like maybe asking someone a question and believing them? Our ancestors valued thoroughness, she replied. And spectacle. I sighed. Of course they did. The orb began to spin, projecting a ring of light around us. A synthesized voice filled the chamber. First question, human. What was your motive when touching the queen's armor? I straightened. Honestly, I thought it was about to malfunction. I fix things. Sometimes badly, but I fix them. That's all. The orb pulsed gently. No painful blast. A good sign. Queen Sarilith, it continued, why did you permit the human to continue repairing your armor? Sarilith considered a long moment. Because I sensed no deception, and because his hands did not tremble as much as expected. I frowned. That is absolutely untrue. My hands were shaking so hard I could have mixed paint. The orb glowed brightly, then dimmed, signaling her answer was accepted. She glanced at me. You hit it well. Thank you, I said, though I wasn't sure if that made me feel better or worse. The orb spun faster. Next question. Human. Do you wish to bond with the queen? I nearly choked. No, not like this. I barely understand your customs, and I'm 90% sure your people already have a parade route planned. The orb emitted a small spark, not painful but disapproving. Sarilith raised a brow. The orb believes your answer is incomplete. I groaned. Fine. I don't want to bond with anyone through accidental intergalactic traditions, but I don't dislike her. She's intimidating and confusing and shockingly patient with me. There. Happy? The orb pulsed warmly. Several advisors dabbed their eyes as if witnessing a romance drama. I pointed at them. Please stop that. Then the orb turned to Sarilith. Queen, do you consider the human a threat? Her ears tilted back slightly, a gesture I hadn't seen before. No. The orb paused. Clarify. She inhaled slowly. Because he acts with instinct, not ambition, and because he says what he thinks, even when it is inconvenient. That is rare in my court. I blinked at her, surprised. She didn't look at me, but her voice carried something unexpectedly sincere. The orb glowed bright gold. Approval. The statues hummed as if gossiping. Before I could tease her about that answer, the advisors rushed forward. The orb of truth acknowledges compatibility. I threw up my hands. It acknowledges honesty, not compatibility. Honesty is the first pillar of union, an elder proclaimed dramatically. I feel like you're all skipping ahead to the wedding chapter, I said. But before I could argue further, a loud chime echoed through the chamber. The statues reoriented themselves, pointing toward the far wall as it split open to reveal a new glowing corridor. Saralith stepped forward with solemn purpose. The next trial, she announced, is the bond alignment. I groaned. You have another test? How many tests does your culture have? 15, she answered, but we will only perform 4. Only, I whispered into my palms. The bond alignment chamber was shaped like a starship engine interior, curved walls, embedded circuits, humming energy conduits. In the center hovered 2 tall pillars of crackling blue light. A platform extended between them. A guard explained, you will step onto the convergence plate. It will scan your neural patterns. If your energies cause destabilization, the ritual ends. I eyed the crackling pillars. Define destabilization. Rapid disintegration of molecular structure, he said politely. I turned to Saralith in panic. Is that common? Only when the bond is false, she answered. Oh, good. So only if we absolutely fail. Saralith stepped onto the platform first, composed and regal. I followed, trying to mimic her posture and failing instantly. The energy rose, buzzing around us like electrified wind. My hair stood on end. Her ears shimmered with violet light, reacting instinctively to the psionic field. A pulse hit my chest. Another wrapped around her armor. The pillars roared louder. I braced for disintegration. Instead, the light around us shifted to warm gold and the energy settled. The advisors gasped in unison. Stability achieved, I exhaled shakily. Oh, thank every star in the nebula. Saralith turned to me slowly. The alignment should not have stabilized so easily. Is that bad? It is. Surprising. An advisor stepped forward. It means your bond is stronger than predicted. I pressed both palms to my face. I don't even know her favorite food. Saralith considered me, her expression unreadable. We will discuss that later. And as the pillars dimmed, I realized something quietly terrifying. The tests weren't proving something about me. They were revealing something about us. We left the chamber of crackling pillars in silence, though the silence wasn't exactly peaceful. It was the kind that makes you aware of every footstep, every breath, every tiny spark coming from a queen's enchanted battle armor. The glowing band around my wrist had dimmed, but it still pulsed faintly, syncing with her steps as if it had opinions about us. I tried not to think about that. It was unsettling enough that it hadn't disintegrated me earlier. Saralith led me through a series of archways into an entirely different part of the palace. The halls were quieter here, softer, illuminated by threads of bioluminescent vines that curled along the ceiling like living constellations. The hum of soldiers, advisors, and ceremonial judges faded behind us until it was only the 2 of us walking through a corridor filled with drifting motes of warm golden light. I finally spoke. So, are we done being judged by floating holograms and psychic statues for today? For now, she replied, though her tone suggested the universe had more tests waiting just around the corner. Her long ears relaxed, though, no longer angled sharply with tension. That alone made me feel slightly less doomed. We arrived at a circular garden enclosed by transparent crystal walls. Beyond them, the alien sky spread out in swirling bands of turquoise and deep violet. Strange flowers glowed warmly, opening and closing like breathing creatures. A tree with silver leaves rustled in a wind I couldn't feel. Saralith paused at its base. This is my sanctuary, she said. Few are permitted inside. I looked around in awe. It's beautiful, very calming. No one yelling groom at me in here? Not typically. Good. I'm developing a twitch. A faint smile tugged at her mouth as she approached a bench shaped from smooth polished stone. She gestured for me to sit. I did, trying not to look like someone about to be told he'd accidentally married into royalty. She removed her helmet, placing it beside her. Without it, her long ears softened even more, and her dark eyes seemed brighter, reflecting the swirling sky outside. You are overwhelmed, she said. That obvious? Yes, I sighed. I didn't mean to. Disrupt your entire civilization in a single afternoon. On my world, fixing something is just fixing something. Not courtship, not cosmic destiny, just fixing. Saralith considered that. Lycerans do not touch sacred objects lightly. The heart line of my armor has a bond with its wearer. It responds to emotion, strength, intention. When you touched it, you connected with it in a way few have. I really wish you had told me that earlier, I muttered. I would have worn gloves. Her ears flicked with amusement. I suspect the result would have been the same. I leaned back against the bench. What did the advisors mean earlier? About the alignment stabilizing too easily? Saralith folded her hands. The bond alignment reacts to two minds in proximity. It is a measure of harmony. Even those who seek to marry by choice often struggle to stabilize it. And I didn't? You nearly fell off the platform and panicked the entire time, she said, yet the energy settled around you as if it recognized something. Is that good? It is. Unprecedented. Can I pretend it's good? You may, she said softly. We sat in quiet for a moment. The breeze outside made the silver leaves sing, producing a faint metallic melody. It was peaceful, shockingly so after a day of being evaluated like a malfunctioning robot. I cleared my throat. So, what happens now? Am I still on trial? Should I expect more glowing objects demanding emotional confession? There are more tests, she admitted, but we have time. Time is good, I said. Time means nobody's dragging me into a ceremonial chamber with exploding orbs. She tilted her head. You handled the orb well. I exposed my most embarrassing memories to an audience of complete strangers. And survived. That's a generous interpretation. Saralith seemed to study me, her gaze neither cold nor commanding. You are unlike anyone I have met. You say what you think. You fear openly. You laugh in sacred halls. And yet, you repaired my armor without hesitation. I panicked, I corrected. Instinct can reveal truth, she replied. Her voice had softened again, almost melodic. The glowing vines overhead reflected in her eyes, turning them into shimmering pools of light. I looked away because staring too long suddenly felt complicated. Your people, I said slowly, are reading way too much into this. Perhaps, she said, but they see something, and so do I. My heart thumped in a way that made the glowing band pulse faster. Treasonous traitor of a wristband. She stood then, brushing her fingers along the silver leaf tree. Tomorrow the council will demand clarity. They will push for tradition. But I do not answer blindly to tradition. I exhaled, relieved. So, you're not planning on announcing a royal engagement ceremony before breakfast? Not before breakfast, she said. Perhaps after. I choked. She let out a quiet laugh. Her ears tilted forward again, fully focused on me. Rest tonight, human Aran. Tomorrow we will face them together. Together. The word lingered in the air, warm and dangerous in equal measure. I didn't sleep that night, partly because the Lyceran guest bed hummed with a calming frequency that only made me more aware of how catastrophically loud my thoughts were, and partly because the glowing band around my wrist refused to dim completely. Every few minutes it pulsed lightly, as if reminding me that my life had been derailed by alien armor maintenance. I lay there staring at the alien constellations outside my window, wondering how tomorrow could possibly be worse than today. I did not like how easily the universe answered questions like that. Morning arrived with a soft chime from a wall panel that politely informed me it was time to confront matters of union and cosmic obligation. I groaned into a pillow. Cosmic obligation sounded expensive. I dressed quickly and followed the guard who had been assigned to me. His long ears angled backward in what I'd learned meant mild stress, probably because he was escorting the human with a talent for triggering ancient rituals by accident. The council chamber was already buzzing when I entered. Rows of elders sat in floating chairs shaped like crescent moons, and dozens of advisors crowded the platform. Queen Saralith stood at the center, armored and composed, the faint glow of her chest plate reflecting the swirling patterns in the chamber ceiling. When she turned toward me, her ears shifted, softening slightly. That tiny gesture steadied my pulse more than I wanted to admit. The High Elder raised his staff. We begin today with a single task, determining whether the bond formed is to be formalized according to ancient law. I stepped forward quickly. Before we determine anything, I'd like to note that I have a long history of not formalizing things. Rent payments, gym memberships, that sort of thing. A ripple of gas spread through the chamber. One advisor whispered, "He resists with humor. Such boldness." Saralith lifted a hand and the room fell silent. "We will not rush," she said. "We will proceed with clarity and choice." Choice. I felt the word in my chest. The High Elder gestured toward a raised platform that shimmered with lines of ancient circuitry. Then we shall perform the resonant inquiry. Each participant will speak their truth. The psionic lattice will reveal whether the bond is of obligation or desire. I blinked. Desire? Hold on. Can we skip that part? No, the elder said. Fantastic. That's fantastic. Saralith stepped onto the platform first. She stood tall, ears angled forward, voice steady. My truth is this. I did not seek this bond. It came unexpectedly. Yet the human has acted with honesty and courage. He does not fear speaking against tradition. This I find admirable. The lattice glowed a warm violet. Then everyone stared at me. I cleared my throat. My truth, I touched the armor because I thought it was breaking. I didn't want the queen to explode. That's pretty much all I had planned for that moment. The lattice flickered, waiting. Also, I continued, I don't dislike her. In fact, she's probably the most terrifyingly impressive person I've ever met. And she's been patient with me, which is an achievement by itself. The lattice brightened, asking for more. And maybe, I added reluctantly, maybe I don't mind being near her as much as I pretend. The chamber erupted in whispers. The lattice pulsed gold. The High Elder slammed his staff. The bond is acknowledged. The truth aligns. Hold on, I protested. Alignment doesn't mean marriage. Alignment means aligned. Indeed, Saralith said calmly, stepping off the platform. Alignment means compatibility, not destiny. She faced the council, voice firm. Tradition states that a queen may choose. Today I choose not to bind the human by law, not by ritual, not by pressure. The council froze in shock. One elder dropped his scroll. I choose, as she continued, to determine my future not through ancient expectation, but through understanding. I stared at her. My heart did something traitorous again. The High Elder sputtered. You would break ceremony? Defy precedent? Yes. Saralith lifted her chin. Because I am queen, not the past. The room filled with chaotic debate, ears twitching, advisors panicking. I leaned toward Saralith. So, does this mean I'm not being forced into royal matrimony? Her voice softened. No, it means you are free. I exhaled in relief. The glowing band dimmed further, almost content. But Saralith wasn't finished. She stepped closer, her presence warm beneath the armor. However, she said quietly, freedom does not prevent possibility. I blinked. Possibility? Her ears angled forward. You and I are not bound by law, but something exists. I felt it in the trials. So did you. I opened my mouth, closed it again, then whispered, I don't know what it is yet. Neither do I, she admitted, but we may discover it without force, without tradition. Her eyes held mine for a long, steady moment. Then the council's shouting grew louder, and Saralith turned to face them again. Calm, powerful, unshaken, while I stood beside her, realizing something startling and undeniably frightening. For the first time since all this began, I wanted to stand beside her. The uproar in the council chamber didn't fade. It swelled, echoing through the crystalline arches until it felt like the whole palace vibrated with outrage, disbelief, and something suspiciously like gossip. Advisors argued over doctrine, elders waved ceremonial scrolls like threatening flags, and guards quietly made bets in the corner. Through it all, Queen Saralith stood perfectly still, radiating the kind of royal authority that made even the floating chairs drift backward in caution. I stood beside her, trying to look supportive, and not like someone who desperately wanted to hide behind a potted plant. At last, Saralith raised her hand. The room went silent, as if someone had turned off the sound in a video. We will reconvene tomorrow, she said calmly. But understand this, I will not be bound by law that denies choice. The elders sputtered, advisors gasped, and one ancient council member fainted into his floating chair, which thankfully had safety cushioning. I followed Saralith out before anyone could stop us, the glowing band around my wrist flickering as if equally eager to escape the chaos. Once we were in the quiet corridor, she released a slow breath. That was inelegant. I thought you handled it beautifully, I said, especially the part where you didn't let them sacrifice me to the ceremonial orb of doom. Her ears tilted forward. There is no ceremonial orb of doom. There absolutely will be if they get desperate enough, I muttered. She didn't deny it. We walked toward her sanctuary garden again, the place where things felt calmer, clearer. The silver leaves rustled softly as we entered, and for the first time since arriving on this planet, I felt my shoulders loosen. Saralith removed her helmet and set it aside, and the soft, bioluminescent vines above us cast warm light across her features. "These last days have been unexpected," she said softly. "That's one word for it," I replied. "I was expecting maybe a tour of your world, some polite greetings, possibly a snack. I was not expecting psychic tests, sacred armor bonding, or being chanted at like a sports mascot." Her lips curved slightly. "You handled it better than most." "Well, I screamed internally the entire time. Does that count?" "It does." Silence settled between us, not awkward, but contemplative. I looked down at the glowing band on my wrist. It had dimmed until it was almost transparent, like a symbol fading now that its purpose was complete. "So, what happens to this thing?" "It will dissolve once the bond of obligation is void," she said. "It senses our intentions now." I watched it flicker gently. "Feels strange. I got used to it. Like a very clingy bracelet." "A bracelet with dangerous psionic properties," she reminded me. "Right, the best kind." She sat on the stone bench beneath the silver leaf tree. "Aaron, I want to ask you something before the council meets again." Her tone softened, and it hit my chest in a way I wasn't prepared for. I sat beside her. "Ask anything. Preferably not a question about ancient Lissaran vows or molecular disintegration." "This is not ceremonial," she said quietly. "It is personal." That made me straighten. "Okay." She met my gaze, her long ears tilting slightly forward, the gesture I'd come to recognize as sincerity. "These last days have shown me things about myself. I have lived by rule, tradition, and duty. I believed I was unshakable, yet your presence unsettled many things I thought were certain." I blinked. "Is that bad unsettling or good unsettling?" "Both," she admitted, "but mostly good." My heart did the treacherous thing again. "You've changed me too. I didn't plan any of this, but I'm glad I was here, and I'm glad I met you." Her eyes softened. "The council expects an immediate answer, marriage or dissolution. They wish for a clear path, one or the other." "And what do you want?" She took a long breath. "I want a path that is ours to choose. Not forced, not bound by tradition, a path that allows time." Time. The word eased something inside me. Something tight and knotted since the moment I touched her armor. "I'd like that too," I said. "Time. Choice. Maybe figuring out what all of this actually means." The glowing band responded immediately. One soft pulse, then another. Then it slowly unraveled into particles of warm light that drifted upward and dissolved into the air. Saralith watched it go. "The bond of obligation has ended. But the rest?" I asked. "That," she said gently, "is still ours to explore." Outside the sanctuary, the distant sounds of debate and commotion echoed through the halls. But here, under silver leaves and drifting motes of golden light, everything felt still, balanced, possible. She stood and extended her hand toward me, not as a queen demanding allegiance, but as someone offering partnership. I took it. Her fingers were steady and warm against mine. "Come," she said softly. "Tomorrow we will face the council again. But today, we choose our own peace." I nodded. "And maybe we can start by you teaching me how not to offend your ancestors whenever I breathe." Her laugh was quiet, real. "That may take longer than you expect." We walked forward together through the glowing garden. No glowing bands binding us. No ancient laws dictating our steps. Just a queen and a human who had survived impossible trials, cultural chaos, psychic orbs, and their own fears to arrive at something new. Something delicate, uncertain, and undeniably alive. And for the first time on her world, I didn't feel like an intruder or an accident. I felt like I belonged exactly where I stood,